Welcome everyone to today's episode. I'm your host Mohammed Yunus, CEO of vFairs, and I'm excited to dive into conversation that's incredibly relevant to the evolving world of events. At vFairs, we have seen firsthand how content and technology are reshaping how events are experienced, and today we'll be unpacking some of the biggest trends in this space. Joining me is someone who brings a wealth of knowledge to this topic. Miguel Neves, Editor-in-Chief of Skift Meetings. Miguel is a seasoned professional with a deep understanding of how events and travel industries operate. He's leading the charge in creating impactful, thought-provoking content that resonates with organizers, sponsors, and attendees alike. I personally follow both Skift content as well as Miguel on LinkedIn, and I'm a big fan of the content that these guys produce. In this episode, we're going to explore the power of content strategy in the event industry, how content can extend the life cycle of an event and keep attendees engaged year-round. We'll also dive into emerging trends for 2024 and 2025, covering everything from evolving attendee expectations to the future of sponsorship models and events. And of course, we'll be learning how Miguel and his team at Skift stay ahead of the curve when it comes to spotting trends and creating content that makes an impact. Miguel, thank you so much for joining us today. Let's dive right in.
Thank you for having me in the kind words.
Miguel, before we dive into the core of today's conversation, can you share a bit about your journey? What initially drew you to the events industry?
So I used to be in the music industry. I'm from Portugal originally. The music industry is quite a small industry in Portugal. I was very involved in lots of different things, from being a musician to also producing in studio and also on stage. And at some point, I kind of left the music industry behind, started working in events, and thought, hey, this is actually a really exciting industry. It has the same sort of peaks and troughs, right? You sort of build up to a big thing, and then you kind of come down from the stage. But there's this kind of building up that's really exciting and bringing a lot of people together. And so that was really my entry point. I actually was in Portugal for a while, tried to make kind of the industry in Portugal work. That didn't really work for me. So I ended up in England doing a degree in conference and events management, and then just really kind of got stuck in, got networking, got connected, try to understand as much of how the industry works and how really to be a professional in that industry. I was a planner for a few years, worked for IMEX, the big trade show, for 6 years, then went on my own, did some marketing, did my own marketing company for about 3 years. And for 3.5 years now, I've been the editor-in-chief of Skift Meetings.
And what excited you to join Skift Meetings? So again, I can see that you were pretty much everywhere, from music to being on the trade show IMEX floor to work for some of the event tech companies. Why Skift Meetings?
Well, Skift Meetings actually, so it was an acquisition. It was called Event MB originally. That was a company that Julius Solaris started in 2008. And I was a friend of Julius's, and I knew him from, when he started really the blog and how that really developed. And then when he sold to Skift, it was a sort of, who's going to take over? He kind of got bought out. And then I came into the kind of play and was one of the suggestions, I guess. And so it was proposed to me very much as being a really important role in the industry and having this voice in the industry. And remember, at this point, we're sort of midway through the pandemic. I started in February 21, so a year after really everything kind of closed down, and then probably the peak of virtual events, which I've been following quite closely. So it was really interesting for me to have this voice, to be asked to be the voice of the industry, to research, to write, to present at virtual events. So it was very exciting, and I'd never really thought of myself as a journalist or really kind of being in the media world. I see myself very much as kind of an industry person, so I really have that experience. And so, there's been challenges, there's been great opportunities, and I think it's been a really interesting journey into the media world and understanding that kind of where the media world and the events world really combine nicely.
Miguel, again, I have always been a fan of academic. Again, just purely from education. And again, I've seen very few people who have a degree also in the event. So can you just kind of guide me and the audience? Does that help, like having a degree in this space and then being part of that industry also? Because a lot of event professionals I know, they come from very different background, right? Tech, marketing, media, but I've didn't see many coming from that space.
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I think if you're going to have a very specific role in the industry, like particularly for a planner, I don't know if a degree is something that's a prerequisite, but definitely not a prerequisite. I think there's a big argument between people that say it's good and people that say that it doesn't really matter. Yeah. I'm sort of more on the side of it being good. And the reason I say that is I don't think a degree like mine's a postgraduate degree, so a master's degree in the University of Westminster. It kind of made me see the bigger picture, right? So I did a lot of work about destinations and convention bureaus and sort of how you market a destination, how an event impacts a lot of different people. So it really set me up well for this kind of media role, but also I think it set me up well to think strategically about events and look at them as part of a bigger ecosystem and understand a lot of the different moving parts and the different people that it touches. And so I think for that sort of bigger picture thinking, I think it was really useful. It's hard to kind of pick out, yes, this was really important and I use this in my work. Obviously doing research, the methodology, understanding, the research that's out there, understanding the studies. I think that's something I learned during the course, but I don't think there's a direct, it wasn't a practical course that I went, okay, I did this module. Now I understand how to plan events and now I know how to do that. There was planning, etc., as part of the course, but I think it was more the bigger picture that I think that benefited me. And I think because of my journey as sort of like part of the industry, but going into different roles, I think I was able to jump very quickly between different roles or better because of that degree.
Amazing. Miguel, so again, of course, I come from the event tech industry, but I see that Skip meetings, you guys focus both on travel and events. How does that unique perspective shape the content you create? And if you can just guide, like where do you see there's an overlap between the two industries, where events and travel just go hand in hand, if at all?
Yeah, and it's a super interesting topic because I think a lot of industry associations and experts, a lot of people really try to differentiate the meetings industry and events industry from the travel industry. They really try to say, hey, we're separate. We do things differently. We're not just kind of heads on beds. It's kind of the usual standard kind of phrase that people use. And so I think it's an interesting conversation. I don't necessarily disagree. Skift is a media company that covers travel. We're about 100 people in total, and we cover all aspects of travel. So hospitality, hotels, hotels really part of that, but airlines, short-term rentals, a lot of different areas. And we also have an advisory department and a recruitment department. So a lot of different areas of travel. And we really see meetings as part of that, not necessarily to say like, hey, we're like a small part of it and it's only, 30% or 20% or whatever it is. It's not really about saying how big or small the industry is. But I think when it comes to the big players, the business of events, the vast majority are involved in that travel side of events, right? It's the venues, it's the destinations, it's the hotels. And so when you look at it from a pure business perspective, then I think most of the big players within meetings and events overlap or are really, would consider themselves to be part of travel first, and then meetings and events to be kind of a component of that. So I don't know if it's worth kind of going into a debate around that. I think there's definitely different components to it. I think, especially when you're organizing things like an academic conference or an association conference, there's a lot of different motivations and there's a lot of different kind of components that are very different to pure travel. Mm-hmm. But I think when we think about gathering people, particularly international, then I think it's healthy and good to be thought of as part, or to think of the industry as part of the travel industry. So I don't really have an issue with that. I know some people disagree. Happy to have the debate, but I do think it's healthy to think about how the business works.
AI is a big topic everywhere. And again, I think for a very beginner user of AI, the thing where we all felt that AI can help each one of us is the content piece. Now, you're editor-in-chief at Skip Meetings. And again, you cover both events and travel, whether you want to call it just tell me, what are some of the under the radar trends that you think will shape up how we plan and run events, as well as the content piece around it? We are seeing that the content is becoming the key. Both content and networking are becoming the key important factors of any event. So just what's your projection of how this industry is going to be just changed in the years to come because of AI?
We could do a couple of hours on this, I'm sure. I'm sure you have some thoughts as well. It's interesting. AI has definitely been the biggest kind of technology revolution over the last almost 2 years now, since ChatGPT kind of hit the market, became available for free, and everybody started playing with it. And then you have the image generators, Midjourney, you have the video generators, and a lot of other, really interesting technology. I think you're right in saying that the big thing that it has impacted for now, at least when it comes to events, is content in the sense of the marketing side. I think creating emails, websites, creating session descriptions, that's kind of thing is relatively easy. And I think a good use of generative AI. I think as long as you're checking your outputs, as long as you don't just kind of take whatever ChatGPT gives you and throw it in, then I think it's a useful tool, right? To summarize, I think you can say, you can be an expert in the topic, but not necessarily a great presenter in English. And ChatGPT can give you, hey, take these 3 bullet points and create a session description about this that kind of helps me get that idea across. And I think when used well, it can be really useful. I think there is a little bit of a backlash already. I think people do kind of see, ChatGPT or generative AI kind of created content and session descriptions. Like I recently came across a session description that was very obviously created by ChatGPT. And there are these like telltale signs, in the ever-changing world of X. That's sort of like a phrase that ChatGPT uses a lot. And so when you see that, you kind of go, I wish somebody had edited this. Like it isn't great to just have just pure kind of content like that. So I think there's a little bit of a backlash, at least from kind of media professionals. You kind of spot it and you go, oh, that's not great. But I think where I'm most excited is really when it comes to personalization. We've been talking about personalization when it comes to event tech for a long time, and I don't see it happening yet. And I think AI might be what takes us there. And for me, personalization would be having an app or having a portal to an event where you can use it as if you're using a dating app, if you will. I have to admit, I've never used dating apps. I'm not a dating app expert, but from what I understand, Tinder and other dating apps, the simplicity, like the way they work, the UX is very well developed. You see someone, you see a picture of someone, or you read their profile and you swipe yes, right, or left, right? You sort of say yes or no. And that simplicity, that swiping, that kind of action that's very easy to do on a mobile device, I think that's what makes them very work, right? And the kind of the social media feed kind of technology as well that's also present in that. And for me, that's what I think we're going to see when it comes to event tech. I think we're going to see, an event has 1,000 sessions of content. That's just ridiculous, right? Like you're never going to be able to watch 1,000. And just navigating through those 1,000 choices is really exhausting. And while it might work as a marketing technique, look at all the great content we have. In practice, it's really annoying, right? It's a challenge. It becomes a challenge. Like, hey, it's an advantage, but then it becomes a challenge. And so what I think AI is going to enable us to do is to create interfaces that actually understand who we are, understand our actions, and then make that process much easier. Yep. So maybe let's say there's 1,000 sessions, and immediately because the AI is sort of active, it'll know that anything at a junior level or anything on these topics or anything like that, we're not going to be interested in. So I wouldn't say exclude these things, but maybe sort of show them in a secondary kind of level and sort of say, hey, the AI has already helped you go from 1,000 sessions to 100 sessions, right? Okay, that's super helpful. And then there's all sorts of components to this as well. The obvious one being matchmaking and networking, which is very similar to the dating app, right? Kind of saying, I've also seen a lot of promises around matchmaking and networking. And then when I actually use the technology, most of the time, the matchmaking is relatively rudimentary. And I think most companies that I've spoken to have said, hey, this is actually a data quantity issue. We don't have enough data to really make this work. So if we had users across multiple events and they just kind of gave us a lot of data, then we could really fine tune this and it could be really good, but we're not quite there. From my understanding of AI is that we can actually make bigger assumptions. We can make bigger leaps and we can find these things quicker and fine tune who these people are and who they want to meet a lot quicker. So if I could go to an event and have technology really be a guide, really help me make the most of that event in a very sort of co-pilot way, then I think we're getting somewhere. Then I think people are like, hey, if you're using technology, then you're like a super user rather than somebody who's just sort of showing up.
Miguel, I think I want to maybe dig a bit deeper into two topics where one of them is AI for events and event tech, and then AI for content. I'll start with the content piece first, and then we'll come back to the AI for event tech. So first of all, again, the way we at least, use AI is that we see what is the job to be done. And then we think about AI. Okay, is AI going to help me amplify the existing system that we have? Whatever our users are doing, can AI help amplify the user experience or the productivity of that user? Or should AI replace what we have? Because maybe we're doing things the old way, and it should be just a prompt based, etc. Or what, AI shouldn't be there. Again, let's take an example of something more that happens in a company. I might be doing a performance evaluation of an employee. I might give, again, an OpenAI model, etc., that here are the OKRs and here's how this person has performed, etc., etc. Can you do a bit of analysis for me, blah, 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 etc. But once I have that, who should do that performance evaluation? Even though an AI robot can do that, but you should always be a human to human, right? So again, there are some places where AI can help do a lot of work, but then there are things where it should always be a human doing it. I personally, as of now, so far, haven't seen, you can say, a viral content out there that's actually meaningful, impactful, just generated by AI. Actually, more and more AI has been there, and more the content has been generated by AI, and we all do it at a certain point within our roles. The more the genuine content stands out now. Again, people like you and your post and Julius, etc. Now you can see that it's actual knowledge that's being shared with the audience out there. So just first question to you, because I know you produce a lot of content, etc. Have you seen AI producing content that has been useful for your audience? And if yes, maybe guide us on how to make use of AI for something like that. And then in a perfect world, if at all possible, because I know it's a really broad question, when you're producing content, let's say, if you can walk us through that journey where AI can be used and where AI should never be used in your role as editor-in-chief, or as you look into your team members, where do you tell your team members that when doing this, use AI to enhance your productivity or maybe to replace what you were doing manually, but in this part, never use AI? So if you can, I hope my question is a bit clear.
Yeah, no, happy to share my thoughts. And again, I think, you have a lot of brain power in your company and yourself as well, looking into AI. So I don't want to speak out of turn. I'll share my experience and my kind of view on it, right? I agree. I haven't seen any great content come out of AI. And so I think that's definitely where we are at the moment. And I think if I answer the second question, we'll probably answer the first one anyway. But so what I like to use AI for is for kind of summarizing, for giving me different ideas. And so I have experimented quite a bit with, for example, let's say you record this podcast, right? And you want to turn this podcast into an article. And you can easily, transcribe the podcast using AI, pretty accurate, let's say 98, 99% accuracy. Sometimes, acronyms and things like that are misunderstood, but it's pretty good. And then you feed that into AI and say, hey, this is an interview with Miguel from Skiff Meetings, and let's create an article about this. And it'll do it, right? But it'll be pretty bland, right? It'll be sort of like, oh, Miguel talked about AI, and he did this thing, and he did that. And it's usually kind of like, no, it's not. It's usually accurate, and it depends a little bit. If you make the question too broad, or if you keep the stuff too simple, then sometimes AI hallucinates, and then you get like stuff ends up in there. You're like, he didn't actually say that. That's weird. So you have to always double check that. But even if that's accurate, you get a pretty bland kind of piece of content. Now, the way I've been working with AI, and I encourage my team to work with AI, is to kind of break down the process and then figure out which bits AI can really help you with. So if I think about it, using this example, hey, I'm going to write an article about this podcast recording, but I don't want to just summarize it. I want to kind of figure out what was really interesting. What did Miguel say that was really interesting? And so the kind of things I'll use AI to do is like, hey, take this, an hour recording or whatever it is, and summarize this into bullet points. And then it'll give me, 10, 15 bullet points of what we talked about. Okay, cool. And then I'll look into that like, okay, so what is it from these bullet points that I think is interesting? And I think this is where it gets kind of interesting, because AI doesn't know what's interesting, right? AI just summarizes everything and thinks everything is interesting, right? And you go, hey, so if you kind of then tell AI, hey, this, bullet point number 7 and bullet point number 9, tell me a little bit more, like expand on that. And then it'll kind of expand on it and say, like kind of build it then. It's like, okay, that's interesting. I think these are the most interesting parts of this conversation. So based on these 2 bullet points that I identified, give me an idea for sort of an angle to the story or like a title. And then AI will give you, you can ask it for 10 ideas, and you can keep doing this until you find something that's interesting. And you won't always get great results. But this idea of sort of using AI as almost like an assistant or sort of somebody to throw ideas back and forth with is really interesting, because every once in a while, like I'll ask it for 10 headlines or 10 ideas for an article based on an interview or something like that. And most of them will be terrible or will be really obvious. But then there's like 1 or 2 that I'm like, that's interesting. Actually, yeah, that is an interesting quote, right? And so what I think is super interesting is this sort of back and forth. So as far as I've used AI for content, my best advice is to treat it like a virtual assistant. Treat it like you would treat a trainee. And the advantage is this trainee or this person that's helping you out is very fast. It'll give you results almost instantly. The challenge is it's a very confident trainee, but it's not always right, or it doesn't always have great answers. So it's as if you have this like junior assistant that's helping you out. They can be great at summarizing stuff when it's just about, taking a big paragraph, make it into 1 sentence. Great. They can do that pretty well. Now, don't rely on it to tell you what's good and what's bad, to tell you what's exciting and what's not exciting, to tell you what's a trend and what's not a trend, because it'll think everything's a trend. And so as long as you kind of keep those important pieces of decision-making up to you and use the AI for the bits that aren't as important, that's really the summarizing, the condensing, the shooting different ideas, because it's almost like the AI is never going to be upset if you say that's a terrible idea, right? The AI is not going to mind that. But if you're talking with a person, sometimes that's a hard conversation to have. But the AI will just keep giving you ideas, and maybe it won't give you anything decent, but maybe there's something in there where you'll go, that's really interesting. You can ask it then to kind of double down or to research that more. I would always be a little bit careful about asking it something that's too broad. So I tend to do, when I work with AI, I tend to sort of feed it a transcript or give it some information and say, hey, only use this information. Don't go on the internet. Don't do anything else. Just focus on what I've given you right now. What can you say about this? And if you keep it like that, I've been quite impressed with the results. And that is now part of my daily kind of way of producing content, is to use AI as I don't want to say low-level assistant, but that's kind of the thinking, right? It's like this idea of like, let's not give it these important tasks. And hopefully it frees you up to then do the important tasks, right? To make those decisions and keep that process going in the most succinct and kind of most efficient way possible.
Interesting. Just one question, like someone who's starting their career in journalism and writing content, etc. Do you think like having this assistant from day one, is it going to enhance their creativity or just limit their creativity? Because every time you need some help, you can just go and ask this assistant now for help. And I just wonder, like even for my own kids sometimes, that should I be encouraging them to use ChatGPT just because it's someone that can help you right away, and it can be trained in a way where it asks you a question rather than give you answer. But just on the other side, specifically when it comes to this journalism and content creation piece, someone who's just starting it, I know that a lot of you guys have careers in this one, and again, you can see when and why to use something like this. But how do you see like the future of people who are going to write content, who are just starting their career now, having something this on the side? Will it help them in the future, or will it just diminish their creativity just because here it is?
I think it'll always be a positive. I really do. For me, I kind of see it as, when you're doing, if you're anywhere near my age and you're doing maths at school, at some point, pocket calculators became a thing. And then, should they be allowed in class? And I think it's the same kind of question. Should we use AI? And my thought is the answer is always yes. And now, if you're asking me, are my journalistic skills better or worse because I've been using AI? I think the answer is probably worse, because then I'm relying on it. It is a crutch, right? So it's the same thing as if you're asking me, is my, hand calculation of math better or worse since I've used the calculator? It's definitely worse, but that's not what we're looking for, right? So for me, it's like you have to use AI for what it's really designed to do, and you have to use it carefully. I think if you're going to create really low level quantity, then AI is going to do it for you, and you probably won't have a job if that's what, whoever that content is being created for is looking for. But then when you're then talking about a content strategy, talking about creative output, AI is definitely going to help. At least it's going to definitely help the efficiency of it. It's going to help and another thing you can use AI for is to ask it to criticize your work. You can put your draft in and say, hey, could you tell me how to make this punchier? Could you tell it how to make it more professional? And it will. And again, we don't have to take everything it says and accept everything, but a lot of times it's, we have to remember that it's read or it's ingested, millions of pieces of content. And as long as that content is of a, agreeable level, can't guarantee that it is, but there's a sort of, base standard, then it'll probably be able to say, look, this is something you should look at, or this argument wasn't well done, this, things like that. And you can ask it very specific things, right? Because it knows what an academic piece of writing is supposed to be compared to a business journalism, let's say. They're different things. Some of the principles apply to both, but there's different kind of things that are expected in different types of writing. So as much as it pains me in some ways to say this, I think that it's always better with AI, provided there's an understanding. And, it's a little bit like thinking, should school kids use Google, or should they be, researching in books or whatever? Like, I think we're a little bit past that argument now, but it's kind of the same argument, right? It's like, you should definitely use Google, but you should also understand how Google works. And I think it's the same thing here. You should understand how AI works. Now, I'm not an AI genius by any means, but I've done a little bit of research. I understand the concept of it kind of having access to a huge amount of content and then essentially synthesizing outputs that are similar to what it's ingested. Yep. And so, I think when it comes to creative writing, that's a pretty good use of AI because it has ingested a huge amount of writing, so it knows what to expect. But we have to remember that it's generative AI. It's not a creative genius there. And so we should use it for what it's good at.
I know that you guys run a lot of virtual events, a lot of in-person events, and we discussed that your role might be more on the content creation piece. But wherever possible, I just want to come to the event tech piece and see, are there places where AI, even as an attendee experience, can help attendee experience be better in the future? And then wherever possible, wherever you have been part of that thing, as an event organizer running an event or setting up an event where AI can help. So for example, some of the things that you mentioned, the easy one is as an attendee or even as an event organizer, if AI is there for networking or matchmaking, that's a no-brainer. We all want to network with the people that we really are craving to meet, etc. So I think that's pretty straightforward. But I think everything else in a virtual event, whether it's landing page content and the registration form and then the session description creation, which you mentioned, AI can easily help. And if there are thousands of sessions, just consuming those session descriptions and which are the top 3, 5, 7 I should attend as an event marketer or event professional, etc. Just your top 3 picks of where you believe that event tech should make use of AI to provide even a better experience to attendees or event organizers wherever possible, just for better experience overall.
Yeah, I think anywhere where AI can help organize content, it's super helpful. I talked earlier about this idea of personalization. I think that's kind of almost an extreme version, or what we'd like to see like as in the future. But from a simple perspective, if you take sessions and then you're able to, for example, write blog posts or short descriptions about certain tracks, for example, and then pick out sessions and sort of make that into an interesting narrative, that's something that AI can do pretty easily, right? It can look through session descriptions, kind of connect the dots, and make a storyline for somebody who's at a certain level, interested in a certain topic. I think that's a great use, right? Particularly if organizers can look into the data. And again, probably a second use of AI here is looking at data and finding common patterns, right? Which is something that, yes, you could put things into a spreadsheet, filter, look at different views, pivot tables, etc., and you can go there. But a lot of times AI can do that much faster, right? And you can identify, hey, it looks like we have a lot of men aged between 25 and 35 that are based on the East Coast that seem to be interested in the sort of, I don't know, the finance side of our topic or whatever it is. Hey, maybe we should write some content aimed at people that fit this profile, right? And this is the kind of stuff that I think good organizers have been doing for years. It takes a lot of work.
Yep.
And now with AI, you can do that. I wouldn't say instantly, and you're not going to have a perfect article, with a magic prompt. It's not going to be like, doom, done. But you can get there very efficiently. And that saves you time for other things. For example, how do you figure out the timing of when this communication should be out there?
Yep.
Right? Like figuring out the correlation between registration patterns and when this content is useful. This is the kind of stuff that you want to look through landing page and website records and figure out, hey, when are people actually jumping on our website? Annoyingly, it's probably at the last minute. It's like I'm getting on a flight and I need to know what's happening next week. Hey, be it, right? So then make sure that content's ready to go, or it's easy to find on the app or whatever it is, and then you kind of put it in there. So I think that navigating through tons of content, summarizing it, making it useful, looking through data is super powerful, and that's a really kind of very interesting use of AI. And I think also, kind of following up on that data thing, also the post-event side of things, the surveys, even things about, how to ask better survey questions. That's something that AI can help with, just figuring out what's a good survey question. And I think it's always best to not think about what's a good survey question, but what are you actually trying to find? What is it that you want to know as an organizer? And then I don't know if AI will give you the perfect answer, but it'll definitely give you suggestions on what is a good type of question to ask. And then analyzing that data. If you can analyze that data quickly, you can make quick decisions about next year's event, or maybe the next event if there's one coming up in a couple of months or whatever it is. Hey, looks like people really like this, but they didn't really like that. Let's make some changes to the content to adjust to that. Again, AI is going to enable you to move much faster.
Miguel, you mentioned something, and again, that was a topic that a lot of other people were discussing within the events industry. I'm just going to ask you. You said, annoyingly, people will look at your website just in the last minute. And just one question come to my mind, because last week I was sitting with someone who organized one of the largest conferences in Europe. And the guy was like, I was extremely stressed over the last 2 months because more than 50% of the ticket sales happened in the last 1 month. And the 50% of that 50% happened in the last 1 week. And it was like, this is not how it used to happen before. So he might have got the same amount of people who attended the event, but just when people were purchasing the tickets, have been completely shuffled. So, not in the beginning when he was giving the early bird discount, but just in the last 1 week when he was just literally stressed out of what will happen to this conference. Just because you deal with travel industry a lot, do you have some insights of why this is happening, or is this something that's becoming common where people are unfortunately purchasing tickets in the last minute, and it becomes really, really hard for an event organizer to plan all of that?
If I had the answer to that, then I would probably be a millionaire. So I don't think there's a simple answer to that. My feeling is that it's more of a just general issue, like a general societal development, than it is an event thing. Okay. I think it's more to do with the fact that we're so last minute, that we don't print stuff out, that we don't really, we order stuff on Amazon that we thought about yesterday and it arrives on our doorstep tomorrow. And this way of thinking, we book flights very last minute, etc. I think this way of thinking is what's causing that, and also the sort of indecision. I think there is an element of still a recovery from COVID, still businesses trying to figure out how they operate. Do they need to go to all these events? Do they have the budget? So there's still a lot of uncertainty. Budgets are sort of like on their second year of some sort of normality now. So there's an element of, oh, we didn't really do that 2 years ago. Oh, we did it last year. Okay, we should probably do it again this year. So there's, kind of those conversations still happening. But I think it's just a reflection of society being much more last minute. And unfortunately, I think for planners, there isn't really an easy answer there. The early bird, as you mentioned, is sort of a very well-known tactic. I think some people have been suggesting early bird doesn't really work that well. I would question that. I think people still like the discounts, but there is an element of not just giving people a financial discount, but also giving them like extra value, right? Because the early bird is very much just the price difference.
Yeah.
Extra value could be something like, hey, if you're registered for this, you get to do this free webinar with one of our key speakers where he'll speak to only 100 people and, answer your questions before the event. That I think is a clever marketing technique that'll get people talking about it and say, hey, this is actually kind of a good reason for me to register and I'll save some money. Right. So there is a kind of shift there into providing value that I think could be very successful. But yeah, I don't know if I can offer anything beyond kind of societal change, remote work, hybrid workforces, new generations coming into the workforce. There's a lot of change and a lot of stuff that just isn't it's unlikely that people will just book very far in advance. That doesn't feel like where society's going.
Yeah. I want to discuss some of the content piece. And again, I want to maybe see, I know a decade back, we were all about let's write blogs and, blogs will help. Of course, people were reading blogs and, that was helpful content, for the reader. And then even from an SEO perspective, it was really, really good. Then here come this wave of podcast and then, social media, etc. How's content strategy evolving in the event space in particular? And again, just give me some examples of what's working for Skift meetings a lot. Are these the case studies? Are these the research reports? Are these I know TikTok, Instagram has these reel videos, etc. Those, 1-minute fighters. If you can just comment on different types of content that you're producing and the different distribution mediums, whether it's the website or the blogs, and just your take on some of those things within the event space in particular.
Yeah, look, I think we're a media company and somewhat old-fashioned in some ways, because I could sit here and talk about TikTok and talk about all sorts of different media, and it's all content, right? Whether it's video, whether it's written, etc., whether it's a podcast, it's all written. We do our own podcast, which I very much enjoy doing. We've actually recently shifted our podcast. We were doing a very personality-focused podcast, and we've shifted towards a headline-focused podcast. So it's about finding a topic that's really interesting to talk about and then finding someone who we can discuss that topic with. And that has its challenges because it's quite last minute. You have to sort of go and jump and find somebody interesting. But also it keeps it very fresh, right? Rather than sort of relying on, oh, this person is really interesting, I'm sure it'll be a good conversation. Different strategy. I wouldn't say it works better or worse, but it's kind of more aligned with what we do. We're a news company at the end of the day, so we want to kind of have headlines and focus on that side of things. So in that ways, we're quite old-fashioned, or we're quite kind of stuck on our written media as being the main thing. I think one area that we're definitely looking into differentiating ourselves is really writing about topics that other media or other publications in the space don't want to write about. We've been tackling things like DEI and whether you should boycott destinations or not. We were talking about ageism and how a lot of planners are older and then get rejected from jobs and promotions and things like that because of their age. And if, that's an issue, if that's just an age thing, right? If they can do the job, then this doesn't make sense. And so our focus is more on the kind of like topics that matter, right? Because I think playing a numbers game, especially when it comes to meetings and events, and we're talking about the business events industry, it's a small industry, right? There aren't millions and millions of people working in business events, particularly ones that would actually want to read about it.
Yeah.
And so we always have to think about it on a relatively small scale. So it's more important for us that the right readers are on our website than a huge number of readers are on our website. So I think the blogging, SEO is still very important for us. We want to write about things that people search for. But I think that applies to any news media, right? Unless you're, the New York Times or the Washington Post, there's very few media outlets that people will actively visit to see what's in the news. Most people find their news by something they see on LinkedIn or something that's in their feed or whatever it is. Like there's not many places that people go for just, hey, what's in the news? I'll go to this site, right? And I don't think in the meetings industry that necessarily exists. My competitors might say I'm wrong and they are the source, but I don't think so. I think that it's very much about where those conversations are happening. And so in the last few years, LinkedIn has really become the place. It has become the place where a lot of the business conversations happen. And some people don't like it. Some people feel like it's becoming TikTok, and there's videos now, and there's all these things, and you're always playing with algorithms. And yes, LinkedIn and Microsoft in this case are controlling, and it's kind of rented land. You don't own it. You don't own a mailing list. You don't know how many people are going to see it. But ultimately, it's a destination where people go. It's one of these destinations. It's not the New York Times, but it's a site that people go to, probably because they have some sort of notification or somebody pinged them, but they go to there a lot. And so if you can be present on that site, have a voice, say something that's interesting. It's not going to be millions, but every once in a while, there's one of my posts that has, a few thousand or tens of thousands of views. And you're like, hey, this struck a chord. There's something here, right? And so that's kind of what we're looking for. We're looking for writing the stories that matter, having a voice, and it is a challenging line we try to walk, because as journalists, as media, we're not really supposed to have an opinion, right? We're not supposed to choose sides, and so we want to make sure that we talk about those topics that others won't talk about, but we want to offer a balanced view, right? And so we want to make sure that whatever we do is not just starting an argument, or is not just like a nasty statement. Like, that's not something that we can do, and the reason is we want to keep our neutral perspective. We want to be journalists. We want to kind of say, hey, we thought this was interesting. We looked into it, and this is what we found, and this is what these people told us. And hopefully we're showcasing the thoughts of people that are reliable and interesting, right? And then we're making a case for, hey, this might be something we're looking into or not. So that's sort of where we are. And in some ways, that's not new. That's sort of the basis of good journalism for hundreds of years. Yeah. But we're always trying to kind of adapt it and figure out how to do it for a modern audience. Again, a little bit like your question about the people registering last minute. People are consuming things last minute. So we have to be quick and sort of say things, reach conclusions very quickly, but essentially be sort of with our ear on the ground, just kind of figure out what's going on.
And just like, what's your thought on, just for the same events for business industry? Again, pretty much same thing. Like, we also feel that LinkedIn is the place where we find most of the people within the event space. But more about the format. So again, on LinkedIn, I know that it was all about just purely text-based content. In your case, I know that you guys do really amazing reports that people can go ahead and can download and can get a lot more analysis. But just because people are last minute, people are consuming content last minute, is it that people are also now looking for, a 2-minute summary in the form of a video or the text post, or are people still reading or actually giving value to really these, a lot of hard work goes into producing a case study or a research report, etc. Do you have a certain strategy in general that you feel works better than the other when it comes to the type of content that you're going to produce, and share in this medium?
Yeah, it's a great question. And, we're asking that all the time. And ultimately,
and just quickly, one, because I say that sometimes I share something, and for example, I will get 100 likes and great, but then I see like, okay, how many times the report itself was downloaded and read? The number of likes that I'm getting here is very different than the actual number of people who have actually downloaded or read the report. And that's the only reason I'm asking.
Yeah, makes sense. Again, we struggle with that all the time, and we're always asking that question and trying to figure out. I think it comes down to a very simple principle, which is that sort of above the fold, below the fold, which comes from, newspapers. Is it above the fold on the top part of the page or the bottom part of the page? And it comes down to kind of headlines, right? We get hundreds of research reports to read through. And that's one of my favorite things to write about is research, right? If it's good research, great. But ultimately, when we read these research reports, we get press releases that say, hey, this is the research report that this did, et cetera, et cetera. As long as the research is interesting, what I'm actually looking for in the middle of all that is the headline. What's the story? What is this data actually telling? Mm-hmm. And when we get that right, people read, right? People will dig into it. And part of it is not giving everything away, but part of it is really piquing people's interest, right? And so while sometimes it's really disappointing that, hey, something was really popular, we had an interesting conversation, but nobody actually read the report or nobody actually clicked on the story and actually read the story, we're sort of becoming okay with the fact that it's just how it is, right? So I'm also experimenting a little bit with, hey, how much can I give away of the story? Maybe sometimes I should just put the story on LinkedIn or do a summarized version. Like on our newsletter, for example, now we have a twice weekly newsletter. We pick one of our stories and then we offer a relatively complete version of the story in the newsletter. It's usually, 3 or 4 small paragraphs long. And the idea with that was we realized that a lot of people will read headlines or read our newsletter, but not actually click through. And then we're like, oh, they're never actually reading the story. But why don't we give them one story that's actually we think is the top story or one of the good stories of this week and kind of just say, hey, it doesn't matter if you don't click through, but if you read these 4 paragraphs, you'll get most of what we're writing about. And part of that whole process is just being okay with that, is sort of acknowledging that even if people don't read the report that you spent days working on, if they understand that who you are, there was a report that was created, and they attribute a level of quality to that report that's good, then I think you need to take that as a win, right? It's like, that's also good. It's not as good as somebody reading the whole report and kind of spending hours on it. But if the message is right, if you got the tone right, if people get that message, in terms of brand building, in terms of being recognized as quality reporting, whatever it is, it's almost as good. And I think for me, it's like almost like chalking those up, like those little victories. If you do enough of those, you get a reputation, etc., and you earn that. And yeah, it's not as good, but I think that's just, again, how the world works. And I think we can sit here and criticize people all day, but then if we look at our own actions, how many times do you download a report that somebody else creates? If it's a competitor or something like that, you'll probably download it to see what they're doing, but that's sort of like competitive analysis. You do that, right? But if it's just like something in your interest, it's very rare that you actually do that. So, there's a deluge of content. There's a lot of content out there. So standing out is hard. And we always have to explore new ways of doing that.
And we only have 24 hours in a day. So again, and we're all fighting for that attention from these audiences. So I know that you run both virtual events and in-person events. And again, I know this was a question more I used to ask that a lot in 2022, but I think it's more relevant now than it was back then. Your take on virtual events now, and are they working for you or not? And then also for in-person events and hybrid events, are people running hybrid events given the cost of everything? What's your recommendation that if someone want to do a virtual event and in-person event, should they do it at the same time or should they just do it one after the other? And just how do you think that digital events and hybrid events, what will happen to them in the future? Like just your take on that.
Let me start with hybrid events first. I think a lot of larger events are hybrid in the wider sense of the term. I don't see a lot of events investing on that really true hybrid experience of sort of having a moderator for the online audience, making it into like a complex event, and then like creating almost like really 2 events at the same time. I think most companies, what they're doing is they're streaming their in-person content and doing a good job of it, but not kind of dwelling on it, because I think it's quite tricky because a lot of the online audience also, they can't be there in person for whatever reason, cost, or they just can't be there. And so they really want sort of access to stuff that's important and they want to jump in and out. And I don't know if a lot of people actually want to engage and interact. Yes, all the sponsors and the suppliers want to, have these online conversations, but the attendees, the buyers, if you will, don't think they're in there to like, meet all the sponsors and have that event experience. And so I think it's okay for us to say like, it's hybrid in the sense that there is an online experience, but it doesn't have to be, true engaged hybrid, whatever you want to call it. So I think they're really relevant, but I think it's fallen into that kind of perspective. On the virtual side, look, we still run virtual events. We've kind of set our format for a 2-hour virtual event. I don't see a lot of kind of multi-day or whole day virtual events happening right now, and pure virtual, not an in-person event. At the end of the day, it's a sort of extended webinar. We do it because we have multiple speakers and we sort of have different topics and we kind of bring in different people. And it works. I think people get it, but a little bit like what I was saying about the hybrid events, I don't think people are spending their whole day thinking about it. I don't think people are kind of mapping their whole week around it. I think people are saying, hey, I registered for this. it fits within that 1 hour or 2 hour period in my calendar. And if it's well produced, if it's well thought out, if the content's good, if the platform's good, if things work, if I can quickly jump into sponsors, if I can quickly chat with someone else who I thought was interesting, connect with them on LinkedIn, and kind of my life is better because of it, fantastic. Then virtual events can be important. They can be part of like a bigger marketing, a bigger engagement piece for associations, for corporations, etc. And I think that's where we are. I think virtual events are definitely still very much alive and kicking. Definitely not, they don't have the expectations that we had during the pandemic. I think, from an investor perspective, particularly, but also just from a user perspective, they're not the future of in-person. They're very different things. And I think we need to be okay with that. But I think most companies still understand, and in many ways, they're very sort of top of funnel. Top of funnel, get people to register for a webinar or a virtual event. It's relatively low commitment. They can jump in, they can see what they need to. And they're great to kind of get people engaged with the brand and then get them to commit to actually going to an in-person event. And I think they're great for those things. There's a million different uses, but I see that as sort of the obvious one.
And again, just because we power hundreds of virtual events, other than in-person events as well, there are many use cases where virtual ones are just a lot more better than in-person ones. So again, I know that that's not the topic of this kind of podcast, but whether it's job fairs, career fairs, benefits fair, the reality is that, the virtual event that's run for those use cases is far better than the in-person one. And then, of course, there are a lot of other.
And I know, you know more about this than I do, but I know that job fairs particularly are an area of virtual events that are doing very well. And that makes sense to me, right? Because like going in person to a job fair is incredibly intimidating. And you're trying to see all these different people and explore all these different avenues. And it's just something that works very well in an online environment. It's a lot less, you don't have to commit as much to it. You don't have to, dress up so much and have all this thing and kind of, so for me, it just makes sense, right? It's not trying to equate the two. It's trying to say, hey, this is a really powerful use of virtual.
Yeah. Just last set of questions. We discussed, of course, behavior is changing. People are signing up for the last minute. People are consuming content in a very quick manner. Let's talk about sponsorships because, again, the same guy that I met and then a lot of other people, different people have different opinion of just sponsoring, committing to these really great events. But then others, they don't have any issue with it. So just purely in terms of that, where do you see how sponsorships are changing and then what sponsors care about now? Do they really care about, the number of views and clicks, or can they go above more on the actual outcome rather than the clicks and the downloads and the people who are out there, more on the quality than on the quantity? So how do you see that just shaping within the industry right now?
I think we came from a perspective of sponsorships, particularly on in-person events, being very sort of branding and kind of like, put a big logo here. Your logo is in the middle of all the logos on the website, or your lanyard, your logo's on the lanyard. And I think those are very static. A lot of those you can't really measure as well, which I always thought was kind of strange, right? And that went, when virtual became really popular, there was sort of similar versions of that, the exhibitor showcase and those kind of things. I don't think those work particularly well. I think unless somebody is at a position where they're actually looking through a number of different companies to buy something, it's unlikely they're going to go and visit the exhibitor showcase, right? And so if content is the driver for events, and in most cases it is at least one of the core drivers, then I think smart sponsors are the ones that are getting involved in that, part of the content. And there's multiple ways of doing that. One, we do that a lot with our events. We have branded content opportunities. So if you go to one of our virtual events or in-person events, you can be on stage, right? But what we do is we don't just let people on stage, hey, you have 10 minutes, do whatever you want. No, we actually build the presentation with them. So we sit down and say, hey, what are your objectives? We want to talk about this. Okay, cool. So let's talk with our editors, and we have a different part of the company that deals with that and say, hey, what do you want to talk about? How do we want to shape this message so that we think it resonates with our audience? And so we create content. We make sure there's a logo up there and people know, hey, this is branded. Mm-hmm. But we essentially create content that we see as just as valuable as their editorial content, right? So we kind of try to help the clients build a content that's really powerful. So that's one of the ways to do it. Sometimes some clients just want to sort of, hey, we just want to display this video of our product, right? And we're like, okay, cool. And then we can charge a premium. Hey, we're going to display this video just before one of the keynote speakers or something like that. So I think that kind of stuff can also work. But you have to sort of realize that people will tune out, right? Look, if it's a really good video, then people will probably stick around and watch it. But most of the time, people are like, okay, there's like an ad for 30 seconds or a minute. I'm going to tune out. So I think the more you can embed this, and I'll give you like an example. This isn't quite directly what you're talking about, but hopefully this will make sense. I was at an event a couple of weeks ago, and at the end of the event, they announced the next year's destination. Right? It was like, next year we're going to this destination, sort of get people interested, etc. And they announced the dates, etc. Normally, what happens is sort of the head of the convention bureau will come on stage and sort of say like, hey, we're at the destination next year, and we're sponsoring lunch this year, and go and have lunch, and it's going to be great. Make sure you come next year. And it's like, okay, it's nice. Everybody likes it, but it's not very impactful. This destination, what they did was they created a video about the destination, and then they had a live performer do a spoken word kind of poem over the video. And the video showed the destination, kind of early footage of the destination. Mm-hmm. And it didn't kind of reveal what the destination was until the very, I think it was maybe 2-3 minutes long, until the very last 10 seconds. And so what we saw was a performance, right? It was like this powerful poem performance and the city. And it was all about the city and how, how magical it was and all these things. And it was like, wow, this person is speaking live, is performing for us, is doing all this stuff. And then there was this big reveal. And for me, it was like, wow, that's how you do a destination presentation, right? And of course, this doesn't apply to all brands, but I think taking that idea of making it into a performance, into a piece of content at the end of the day, that's when you win, right? And yes, look, it's more expensive. You need to work at it. You need to do a lot of other stuff. But event sponsorships aren't cheap, right? If you're not going to invest and actually do something worthwhile, then it's probably not worth it anyway. So I would say stuff like that is what's really working.
100%. Again, I'm part of a chapter and they were taking us for a retreat, and they also, again, pretty much every year they kind of announce where they will take us for the retreat next year. In this case, they also exactly did the same thing, where they actually, when they announced it, there was local food from that country, there was music playing of that country, there were dancers and music that was representing that particular country. And it made me kind of excited right away that I should sign up for it. So I think as and when people kind of do it in a certain way, I agree, it pushes us. One last question, Miguel. I know that you attend a lot of events within the event industry. Your top 3 events that you just always love and recommend, anyone from the event industry, whether it's event tech or events in general, to also attend and experience how great those events are.
Oh, that's a tough one. I don't want to endorse events in particular because I think that's a tricky one for us. But I think IMEX America, we were just at a couple of weeks ago. I think it is by far the largest event for event professionals in the world. So I think that, or the Frankfurt edition, which is also similar size, a little bit smaller, but also very powerful. I think those are very good. There's the competitor to that event, which is IBTM World in Barcelona, happening in a few weeks, I think in a month.
I
think if you're going to kind of have some sort of sense of what the business is all about and see a lot of the big players under one roof, any of those 3 events are great. I think those are definitely ones on my list. And I'll probably just highlight Event Tech Live. They do, they're a competitor of ours, so I'm highlighting competitor, but I think that they've been doing an event tech focused event for, I think, 11 or 12 years now. The London event has been going. I've been to many editions. And they also do their Las Vegas edition, which is a relatively new version of the event. Just because it's, to my mind, maybe others, but as far as I know, on event tech specifically, it's the only real event that's focused on that. And it's a relatively small event, but if you're looking to learn about different event technology, different companies, different products like vFairs, I'm sure, then it's a place to go and, spend some time. There's a lot of education as well around technology. So definitely worth checking out.
Thank you so much, Miguel. Thank you so much for your time. You have been really generous. Again, just for the readers, if they want to follow you, where should they go and find you and, learn a bit more about you and your company?
Sure. So skiffmeetings.com. Please do come and read the news. There's a newsletter, like I said, out twice weekly, Tuesdays and Thursdays. We send out a newsletter with all the latest, the best content from us. So do sign up for that. And just reach out on LinkedIn, follow or connect with me on LinkedIn, and let's have a conversation. Let's talk about what you're hearing, what you're interested in, and if you have questions, then I'm always open to having a conversation through LinkedIn. It's probably the best place to find me.
Thank you so much, Miguel, for giving us your time. And again, catch up later. Thank you.
Always a pleasure.